The following stories were submitted by subscribers. If you have a story that you want featured in this series, submit it over to my email. Number 1.
In my early years, I used to work at a gas station all hours of the night. But this one night in particular, I was sitting there. I saw a car pull up by a pump, and the guy got out of his car and stood by the pump, not paying or anything. I didn't pay too much attention to that guy, but I looked back 15 minutes later, and the guy is still standing there. I began to feel uneasy. Why was this guy just sitting there? Is he on something? Then he fell over. I kind of felt obligated to help him at first. I phoned the police. Then I walked out by the guy, and that's when 2 more men rushed me and said, "Don't go over there. There are 2 more guys in the back of that car, waiting for someone to come over." That's when they got out of the car, and the guy who assumedly fell over hopped up, and they began to gain speed, and I ran into the store with the 2, and the police showed up, but the guys hopped in their car and sped off before the police pulled in. They found the car 2 weeks later, abandoned. They never found the guys.
Number 2. So I had this dream, the scariest dream I've ever had. I was at my house, believe it or not, and I kept hearing this abnormal banging. It sounded so distorted. My dream was telling me it was coming from my attic, but when I went up to my attic, the bang sounded just as far away as before. My brain then said it was coming from my washer room, so I headed in there, and no kidding, there was a man, no distinctable features, banging on my wall. He then turned towards me and grabbed me. That's when I woke up. My heart sank when I could still hear the sound. I grabbed a knife out of my kitchen and began to the source. It was my front door. The bang then stopped completely. I looked out the window. There was a man at the end of my driveway. He was truly the guy who was knocking at my door at 3 in the morning. Number 3. My dad would leave in the early mornings for work, but not before he woke me up, so I could get ready for school. This always was our routine. This one day he woke me up, I hopped in the shower, and he left. I got out of the shower and put my clothes on, but I heard the door open from downstairs. My dad must have forgotten his wallet or something, but he was supposedly gone for 45 minutes. He would be really late for work if he came back. I began creeping downstairs, and when I reached the bottom, no one was there. But I heard the door open. There's gotta be somebody here. I then heard shuffling in the kitchen. I went in there, and there was a fat, sloppy grease ball of a man. I had to think of what to do. So I lunged at the guy and knocked him down to the floor. But if I didn't act fast, this man could easily overpower me. So I began to slug this bastard and ran upstairs. I called the cops, but the guy was already gone. I hope I never relive a situation like that again. Number 4. This story happened to my best friend. For privacy reasons, we'll call him Joe. Joe was a AAA driver for over a decade. This story is one of his calls. Joe got a call about a man stuck without gas close to US 169 at Fort Dodge, which for people who don't know, this location is in Iowa. He grabs gas, loads up his truck, and sets out to the guy's location. When he got there was no car. He began to look around the tree line down the road He then proceeded to drive all over the highway. Joe never found the man who called him. Number 1.
When my cousins and I were kids, we used to play army. We even used the gutters as guns. This one particular time we were playing, a man approached us and asked for our great-grandfather. He's been dead for a decade. We turned around to see no one.
Number 2.
It was 4 a.m. I had to be to work at 5, so I got ready and stepped outside for a smoke before hitting the road. I noticed a man walking down the street. His eyes collided with mine. He had this creepy vibe about him, so I didn't stick around long. I hopped in my car, and I heard a yell outside my house to the left of me. Something along the lines of,
"Where'd you go?"
I hit reverse and peeled out. Thank God he wasn't by my house after work.
Number 3.
It was the last period at school. It was with my favorite teacher and subject, too. But that would change fast. Out of nowhere, the school intercom came on, and we could hear the dean. He was whispering. "Everyone keep quiet. We're under a lockdown. Someone's trying." The speaker cut off, and we all began to panic. But our teacher reassured us that it would be okay. He ran to turn off the lights and lock the door, then began to usher us to the back of the classroom. As the school's power went out, we all looked at each other, unable to conceal the fear in our eyes. Suddenly, we heard banging on the lockers and screaming, and the banging turned into gunshots. It stopped as we heard that oh-so-satisfying sound of sirens. A bald man with crazy in his eyes was promptly arrested. Afterwards, the dean came back on the intercom and explained what happened. The crazy-eyed man had pointed a gun at the dean and superintendent, and they ran into his office and locked the door. The man shot the door, to no avail. I'm still so thankful for those red and blue sirens.
Number 4. When I was 10, my dad would pick me up from school and take me to the park. When we arrived at the park, I rushed to get the first swing I could get. I sat down on a swing and began swinging away. When my dad hollered over that he was going to the bathroom, so don't move and stay out of trouble. I kept swinging when an older couple approached me. They looked a little creepy, but they seemed kind, so I gave them the benefit of the doubt. They then spoke. "What are you doing here all alone?" "I'm here with my dad. He just went to the bathroom." "I don't see him. Maybe he forgot about you and went home. You can come with us and we'll go find him together." Now I don't trust these two. They worded these words like they were talking to a child. They were, of course. The older male began to grab me by the arm and squeezed it firmly. That's when my dad came rushing over. That made the older couple run off. I didn't think they could run. I realize now they were trying to kidnap me and they lost their patience. I'm glad my dad came over when he did. Number 5.
I was babysitting for a couple. They had a 10-year-old son. He was kind of weird. I was sitting on the couch and it was lunchtime, so I made us both a sandwich. I walked back to the couch with 2 plates. I ended up dropping a plate, so I had to get a broom to clean it. I walked back to the mess and there was no glass. I sat down and the kid just looked at me. I opened my sandwich and it was filled with glass. I am glad his parents came home when they did. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed long. Probably nothing good.
Number 6.
I used to walk at night close to 3 a.m. I know, the haunting hour. I enjoyed the peace I got, and it was always breezy. I walked like that for 6 months, but one event made me give that up quick. I was walking and I noticed a white panel van was following me. I know that sounds cliche, but that's just how it is. All of a sudden, the back flew open and men tried grabbing me while driving slow. I sprinted like a track star and leaped over the gate of my neighbors and then jumped my gate into my backyard. My dog growled at me, so I had to comfort him. I can't believe the things that happen every day in the dead of night.
Number 7.
When I was a kid, my mom had an old-fashioned typewriter that I would hear every time I went to bed. The clicking sounds of the keys became a regular occurrence every night. I would hear typing coming from the den, but always chalked it up to my mom burning the midnight oil. One morning, I was upstairs brushing my teeth when I heard what I presumed to be my mom typing away in the den. But then my blood turned cold as I heard my mother in another room shout, "Who's playing with the typewriter?" I instantly ran to my mom and told her how I heard the typewriter every night. My sister chimed in and mentioned that she had heard it every night as well. After that day, other occurrences began to happen in the house. First, it was the chair moving when I was home alone, and then the door started creaking open. I'm just glad we finally moved. But the thought of that typewriter scares me to this day. We still don't know who or what was using it all this time. But I'll be honest, I'm not dying to find out.
Number 8.
I used to walk my dog, a German Shepherd, in the early morning about 2 a.m. To be exact, it was always calm. I began walking down the street and saw out of the corner of my eye a girl jogging down the street. Literally, in the middle of the street. I ignored it and continued my walk. I didn't see the girl until I was coming back home, and she began to run after me. I didn't want it to run, but my German Shepherd wanted to lunge at the girl, biting her Achilles tendon. She fell while screaming in pain. Hard to believe, this all happened at 2 a.m.
Number 9.
I woke up with the biggest migraine I've ever had. I felt like shit. So I lay down on the couch, and a storm was brewing outside, and it was pretty comforting, so I fell asleep fast. I woke up to pitch black. The power must have went out. I went to my breaker box and began to flip some switches. Eventually, the lights came back on. I began to head to the stairs, and the lights went back off. I turned them on again, and no kidding, there was a skinny man hiding behind my washer. I ran up the stairs and called the police. The guy was still there when they arrived because he got stuck behind my washer. What an idiot. He must have snuck in my house when I was sleeping and planned to raid the place when I left for work. He must have been checking out my routine and strategizing a plan.
Number 10.
I used to see a figure standing by my bed right before I went to sleep. This happened for years. This figure looked like my mom, which I thought it was just my mom checking on me and my siblings. But my dad got a divorce and we moved away. I still see the shadow standing by my bed.
Number 1.
I drove home one night after hanging out with my friends at one of my friends' house. It's not common for my dad and mom to go out drinking, so I just let myself inside. I came to the front door, and I unlocked the door, and it immediately relocks itself. I did it once more, and the same thing. Someone must be on the other side of the door relocking it every time I unlock it. I began slamming into the door, realizing now someone must have broken into the house. That's when all of a sudden the door opened, and a tall man shoved me over and began to sprint down the street. I followed after him, but I had lost him after he ran into the woods. I went back home and called the cops, and they did not seem to care. They came and took a statement and left that the last I saw him, and I refused to live in a house without an alarm system. Could you blame me?
Number 2.
When I was a freshman in high school, me and my best friend used to ditch school. We did this to go to the nearby woods to hang and smoke pot where no one could see us. This day, though, I remember it was a Friday. We went into the woods and there lay a dead body of a female. We both were females and high at the time and thought someone was after women, and we ran back to school. There was an investigation. No one was caught for that murder, or as much as I know.
Number 3. When I was 8 and my brother was 10, we loved hanging at our grandmother's house. It was the best. One day we were staying over and our grandma went with me to the store while my brother stayed home. We had a blast, but when we returned to her house, it was trashed. Couches flipped, broken glass from the back door. We found my brother in our bathroom, in tears. Someone broke in and tried to kill him. My mom wouldn't let our grandma keep us until we were teenagers after that. Number 4. I woke up one morning to hear a voice I never heard before. It sounded in distress.
Help me, someone please.
I hopped up and began to the front door. That's when my mom stopped me and asked what I was doing. I said someone needs help outside. There the voice beyond the door spoke again in the same tone.
Help me, someone please.
My mom looked out the peephole and gasped. She later said there stood a deer on its hind legs, staring right at her through the peephole. My mom later explained to me she thinks a skinwalker tried to lure me outside. I think so too. I'm just so glad my mom is of native blood. Skinwalkers mimic their victims that they've killed in the past to try to lure someone else outside, to isolate them and then kill them. I'm just so glad I wasn't one of their victims. When I was 11, me and my family would go to the public lake on weekends. It was always the highlight of my life. But this one time will change my views on that. We went yada yada. I was swimming when my leg was jerked from under the water and I began to kick and splash. My body submerged. My dad dived in and grabbed me. It turns out a teen decided he wanted to attempt to drown me. Thanks a lot. Me and a buddy of mine loved to spend our time ding-dong ditching. Usual things would happen. People would curse or throw things, sometimes threaten with calling the police. But this one time, me and my buddy ventured out to an older-looking house. We knocked because there was no doorbell. A man came out with a gun before we went across the street to hide, and he began to shoot at us. And then he started to chase us. We sprinted down the street and into a familiar forest and managed to get to our house. We stopped ding-dong ditching after that. So I had this dream. I was in the woods on Halloween night with my friends, and we somehow managed to find a log cabin. We stepped inside, and my friends were gone at this point. I began to climb the stairs, which is odd considering this was a tiny log cabin. Anyway, I'm walking upstairs, and I hear a witch's cackle. In real life, I would have ran for the hills, but I continued to ascend the stairs. Then I find a room, and I open it to see red eyes in the pitch black room. I then wake up outside on my porch. I have no idea how I got there. I was camping with my uncle in the forest behind my house. We had a little fire. He told me stories about a man who got lost in these woods and never came out, and that his spirit still haunts the forest trying to find a way out of here. To be honest, those stories scared the hell out of me, but my uncle assured me that they weren't real. My uncle and I hopped in a tent and went to sleep. Around 5 a.m., I began to hear a tap on the side of the tent, so I awoke my uncle, and he told me to be quiet. He grabbed his pistol and dove out of the tent. Now what he said he saw, I will never forget. There was a dirty-looking man clutching a pair of scissors. He saw my uncle with a gun, and figured he didn't fancy his chances, and he ran deep into the woods. I have yet to see that man again.
So I used to live next door to this creepy old lady. She would stare at me when I went to school and when I came back from school every day for like a whole year. And I noticed she was following me to school and back to the crib. So really I'm just glad that we moved, because my mama told me that she heard noises coming from my room at 12:30 in the morning and that the old lady was looking through my window.
I encountered my first stalker when I was in 5th grade. His name was John. He followed me everywhere. I even spotted him peeking out behind the trees in the playground. He asked me out and I told him no, but every day he confessed his love for me, and it really got weird and creepy. I'm just glad he moved away before the next school year.
This happened to me recently. I had to use the bathroom badly, so I headed to the restroom. I get there and head into a stall. I sat down when I heard on the intercom that we were going into a lockdown. I began to panic as I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. The bathroom door opened, I lifted my feet up and covered my mouth. I heard boots clicking on the tile, followed by stall doors slamming open. Then the feet stopped right by my stall door. I thought, this is how it ends for me. The man lifted his head over the stall, and it was my principal. He told me to come out and come with him. I did. The moment we left the restroom, we got shot at. I ran for my life out the emergency exit and down the playground. The police showed up shortly after. The principal had to go to the hospital due to getting shot in the leg, but at least he survived.
I'll never forget the time me and my friends were playing hide and seek in the schoolyard, when an elderly man approached my friend Tom, asking him if the bugs were biting, and he just looked at the old man dumbfounded. The man grabbed his hand and pulled a syringe out of his pants pocket and said, "This is so the bugs don't bite." I yanked my friend's hand back and we all began to run. The man was ill in the head, and hopefully he's getting the proper help he needs.
It was the last day of school. I was ready to leave this hellhole and go home. But something happened that I'll never forget. The bell rang and I was excited to leave. I ran to my locker, grabbed up all my things and shoved them into my backpack. Then I began to rush down the stairs. That's when I heard a loud commotion. Everyone was panicking. Teachers were terrified. Students were crying. Someone had shot and killed the bus driver.
My brother and I were hanging out down in the den when all of a sudden the power went out. My brother and I went back upstairs to a sea of blackness. Everything was out. We bumped into damn near everything as we tried to guide ourselves through the house. When we reached the light, our front door was standing wide open. We found the breaker and switched it on. Nothing was missing from the house, but it seems a break-in got busted when they realized someone was home.
I was home alone as usual per Friday nights. As I sat on the sofa, I heard something fall in the kitchen, and I went in to investigate, and there lay a box of cereal. I picked it up and put it back on the counter and sat back down. I began reading a book when I heard a cabinet in the kitchen open. I went in there again to see no such thing. I decided I was hearing things and being a bit paranoid, so I went out for a quick walk down the street to clear my mind. I came back inside 15 minutes later when I heard a door slam shut from upstairs. I ran out of the house and didn't go back in until my parents came home. No one exited the house, so I was afraid whoever slammed the door was still inside. My dad grabbed a pistol that he kept in his glove box of his car and stormed to the house. He found no one, but did mention that one of the upstairs closets was locked. I thought what I experienced was completely paranormal.
This happened nearly 5 years ago. I was staying the night with my friend Julie at her house. Well, because her house was 10 times as big and better than mine. It was 6 p.m. and we decided on the following: playing tag in the dark. I was it and began running after Julie, and she ran into a room. As I began to chase after her, I saw a shadowy figure down the hallway, crouched down like whoever it was trying to hide. I thought it may have been Julie, but I could have swore she just went into the next room over. I begin to walk over to the figure. When I get about 10 feet from it, I notice it's a man who looked to be in his late 40s. Balding, he was holding something in his hand. Then he pressed his finger up to his mouth, symbolizing me to be quiet. I let out the biggest scream I could possibly produce. The man then ran through an open window out of sight. Her mother came rushing toward me. I told her about the man and she called the police. The man was up in a tree in our backyard. He didn't even try to get away. So that's my story, and why I no longer stay at her house for sleepovers. I make her come over to my house now.
I live next door to an abandoned building. I didn't think much of it until I started hearing moaning type of noises coming from inside the house. At first I thought it was just teens, sneaking in there to have sex. But that theory changed quickly when I heard a tap on the outside of one of the windows parallel to my bedroom. On the second story of the house I peered through to see a face looking directly at me. I screamed and fell backwards. For months I would hear the same tap, but I never had the guts to look back out my window. I ended up moving because of that. I just hate whoever moves into my house, because it would be their problem.
This story took place 3 months ago. I had just started seeing my significant other late at night in the park, about a mile away from each other's house. It was nice. I would always see her at 2:30, and would part ways around 4. I began walking home after seeing her. I was high on life. Nothing could be better. Nothing could bring me down. I turned on some jams and started power walking. I was nearly home when I spotted a man in a suit holding a briefcase. I tried not to stare. I began walking faster, until the man stopped me. Well, he didn't hold out his hand or grab me. He just spoke. And it's a human's instinct, when someone talks to you, you stop. Oh, hi. I need help finding a yellow brick house with a gold mailbox in front of it. Can you help me? I'm sorry, dude. I never heard of that house. I began to walk past him when he repeated himself in the same tone. He then started slowly pursuing me. I ran, but he kept at the same speed. I no longer see my significant other in that park so late at night anymore.
It was summertime, and my friend and I were going over to the pool as it was 70 degrees and we were baking in the sun. We walked over there and hopped in. We spent 45 minutes soaking in the icy water when a creepy-looking guy came out of nowhere and asked us to help him find his dog. We were sad for him despite his appearance and began walking with him. Then he said, "There is no dog, but you're coming with us." All of a sudden, a black SUV pulled up and 2 large men hopped out. I grabbed my friend's hand and we ran to her father, who is an ex-cop, but we managed to forget anything that could catch them.
When I was younger, I used to enjoy sprinting down this running trail 5 minutes from my house, which sprained my ankle in that era. Anyways, one day, no one was on the trail except for me. It was damp from previous rain and I could hear the thunderous roar in the distance. I began jogging when out of nowhere a man jumps out of the shrubbery and pointed a gun at me. Let's just say I nearly shit my pants there. He then muttered, I need money. Just give me money. I threw my wallet at him and ran for my life, the opposite way. Back to my house, it began to rain again. I slipped multiple times in that getaway. Joke's on him. I wasn't carrying any cash. Me and a buddy of mine went camping together in Vermont, literally deep in the woods. We went hiking during the day, and come nightfall we got blackout drunk around a bonfire. Come day 2, we began to hear strange noises from outside our tent, like a rustling noise. Day 3, the noises sounded closer. So my buddy shot his rifle into the darkness of the forest. We heard a loud voice say, it echoed through the woods. Us not knowing what to do, we began sprinting blindly into the woods. Daybreak came, and we went back to grab our things, still hesitant. Our camping gear was trampled, and our bags were gone. We didn't phone the police. I feel stupid for not. But I never go camping deep in the woods again, and I can assure you that's a fact.
I was at a public pool with my dad. I was just swimming around with the other kids in the shallow end. I gotta admit, it was pretty fun. My dad sat there in a chair, watching me and encouraging me. But when my dad got up to use the public restroom, this one older teenager saw it as his opportunity or something like that, because he seemingly grabbed my arm and swam me straight down to the other end of the pool and let go of me. The teen got out and he left. He left me as I kicked and splashed, yelling for my dad to save me. Finally, I submerged under, and my dad came running and dove headfirst into the pool and pulled me out. He never left me alone in a pool until I was 16 years old.
There was this abandoned house next to my school. It was by the playground, but sat pretty much in the woods. I grabbed a flashlight and ventured in one night. The moment I walked in there, I got hit with this horrible stench. I turned on my flashlight to take a look around. There was this reddish-brown stain in the center of the floor. Other than that, there was furniture toppled over, a night desk with some weird-ass writing on it. I jumped as I heard crying down the hallway, then a scream of a woman. I jumped through the window I cracked, dropping my flashlight inside and sprinted home. I will never go back to that place again, maybe with 5 or more people. All I can say is that house was probably haunted, and they can keep my flashlight.
When I was 8, I encountered a person. His name was James. He looked lonely, so I walked over to him in the halls of school and introduced myself. James then went on to tell me how he had just moved here and didn't have any friends yet. I told him I had no friends as well, even though I did. The guy just seemed off in a way that I couldn't describe with words. But James thought that was a good opportunity for us to be friends. The word got around that I was friends with the freak. It turns out that James at his other school would follow his so-called friends around anywhere. It wouldn't even seem he had a house because he would follow 24/7. Anyway, I went home trying to dodge James. It was a good thing I rode the bus to my house, otherwise James would have walked with me. I got home, did my assignment I had for science, ate dinner, and went to bed. Sometime between 2 in the morning, I heard a loud thud in my room. I turned on the light to see James kneeling in my room, and he had a hatchet. That was cool ditching me after school. No one ditches me. I literally screamed like a little girl until my dad rushed in the room, but James managed to hop out the window out of sight. I knew who it was though, and I told my dad, and we got a restraining order. That's all we could get considering James didn't exactly do anything besides breaking and entering. I learned my lesson. Never befriend the new kid at school.
This story I'm about to tell you is by all means true. It was just another rainy day in June. My brother and I sat by our bed watching the rain, when the rain turned into thunder and lightning. All of a sudden the power went out completely. We ran downstairs tripping and bumping into everything in the living room. Our dad told me to follow him outside to help him with the breaker box. I held the flashlight while he began flipping switches when I picked up on footsteps on the borderline of our fence and our neighbors. I told my dad, and he looked up and told me to wait by the breaker. What my dad said he saw next was something that I could just not believe. There was an older man jumping the fence on the opposite side of my neighbor's yard. So it turns out this guy turned off our breaker and was waiting on the opposite side of our fence for one of us to come outside so we could do God knows what else.
When I was 10, I fell off my bike, which made me roll my ankle pretty badly. I needed to use a wheelchair because I wouldn't stop walking on it. My mother took me to the park to get some fresh air since I'd been cooped up inside ever since the incident. She sat me by a picnic bench and told me she was going to use the bathroom. She left as I just sat there. 10 minutes go by and this old man balding with a crusty looking beard sits next to me and tries to make small talk. I'm not answering him, so he gets up and I assumed he left. But soon he gets up behind my wheelchair and begins to start rolling it. I look back and the man from before is pushing me. At this point, I didn't care how much pain I would go through. I had to get away from this creep. I get up and start limp running. I meet my mom halfway and tell her about the man. We go back to my wheelchair, which was left on its side, and we go home. Neither one of us ever saw the man again, or at least as far as we know.
This was the creepiest birthday I've ever had. It makes me uneasy every time I think about it. I was at a pizza arcade place with my friends and their family. We were all running around playing games when a clown came in through the doors and he started the usual clown tricks, the nose horn and the flower that sprays you with water. After those little tricks, the man comes up to me and tells me to come with him because he has a present for me in his van. Me being a little kid, I was excited. The man took me by the hand and simply just walked me to his van and tells me, "Jump in the back seat, the present's in the back seat, look in there deeper." As I got into the back seat, he slams the door shut and peels out onto the main road going about 90 miles an hour. He then says, "You'll never see your mommy and daddy again. I flip out and start kicking his back seat, slamming against the door until the man stops the car abruptly and turns around to me and says, "Get the fuck out now." I did, and he just left me in the middle of the road. I somehow managed to walk back to the arcade, and my mother was worried sick, and I told her what happened. The cops were called, but they never caught the guy.
I was walking home one late night. I step in my house and immediately something felt off. I put my keys down on the counter and begin looking around, when all of a sudden I hear a loud thud upstairs near my bedroom. I crept upstairs and peered down the hallway. There was a shadow at the other end of the hallway closing my door. I ran downstairs, grabbed my phone and my keys, drove down the street and called the police. They never caught the guy, and I've since moved out of that house.
So this happened about 3 to 4 years ago. I'm not necessarily sure when, but I was trying to fall asleep when I heard my bedroom door creak open, and an older short woman came hobbling in. I was a little shaken, and all I wanted to do was jump up and scream, but I realized I couldn't move any of my body parts. The only thing I could move was my eyes. The older woman disappeared from my line of vision, but I knew she was still in the room. She was in the blind spot next to the bed. That's when she hopped up right on top of me. Her face was dripping blood, and it was as if she was decomposing in front of my eyes. I was then able to move. I ran out of my house in a dead sprint to my friend's house. She said that I might have experienced sleep paralysis for the first time. I hope she was right. I truly hope that old woman was all in my head, and not just a crazy demon lurking in the shadows.
The following story happened about 3 to 5 years ago. While I was at a campsite with my dad, I skipped night time. We had just laid down and my dad fell right asleep. But not me. I didn't tossing and turning in my sleeping bag for about 2 hours. That's when I started hearing walking near our tent. I also heard what sounded like a dog growling. I sat up and tried to nudge my dad, but he wouldn't wake up. All of a sudden I heard what sounded like a wolf howling, but it sounded more corrupted, almost demonic. My dad jumped up asking if I heard it. I told him what happened while he was unconscious. He said, what I experienced was most likely a skinwalker.
There was this creepy lady who would sit on her porch and just watch me. She did this for 5 years before the police flooded the streets to take her away in handcuffs. She apparently was a child murderer. Crazy how I lived next door to a murderer. That I could have been her next victim.
I lived next to a heavily wooded area. I would constantly walk down this creek that was literally smack dab in the middle of the woods. There was always no one down there, so I was a little shocked when I got there and there was a man that stood by the creek. I turned to walk back when I heard a mutter, "Don't go. I need friends." I just kept running. When I looked back, I saw the man was hiding by a tree, and I finally got to my house. When I looked outside from the upstairs bedroom window, I saw the man looking around for me. I don't know if he knows where I live at, I hope he doesn't.
This just happened recently while I was walking near the tree line of a nearby park. I saw something horrific that I still can't explain. There was a man standing on a tree branch 10 feet in the air. He just jumped and snapped his neck. All I see is his lifeless body dangling there. He had a smile on his face. I turned away because I felt like I was generally going to be sick. I looked back after 15 minutes. The man's lifeless corpse had vanished, noose and all. Let's just say I ran home after that, and I had nightmares for months, but I think I'm doing fine now. I can still see his face to this day. When I was young, I lived in a 100-year-old house in a small town. One summer day, I was preparing to take a shower when I heard my father yell my name from downstairs. I hollered down, "Yeah, Dad, what?" I didn't hear a reply back, so I shrugged it off and proceeded to the bathroom. When I heard my dad call my name again, sounding much more stern, I yelled down, "What, Dad?" He then started screaming my name. I ran downstairs expecting to be in trouble. I got downstairs and no one was in the house. I proceeded to run outside to see what my dad needed. He was inside a derby car hood. I asked him what he needed, and he looked at me like I was insane and said he'd been out here all day, and he didn't call my name. I'm a mother and I lived in the country. I was walking my daughter to the bus, and at the end of our long driveway, I looked over to see a soldier standing by a telephone pole. I blinked and he was gone. I freaked out a little. I've seen him a few times that year, but I wasn't scared anymore. I just thought of it as him protecting our house. I hope I was right about that. When I was 16, I worked the closing shift at a fast food restaurant. Our restaurant didn't close until midnight, and I wouldn't get home until 2 in the morning most nights. This was like any other night. I would usually get home and eat and watch TV. No, this was the 90s and we had an old console TV. You had to pull a button to turn it on, and push it in to turn it off, as well as turn it side to side to set the volume. After I unwound and eventually got tired, I turned off the TV that I was watching quietly because my parents' room was right next to the living room. I headed upstairs to the bed. Halfway up the stairs, the TV turned on full blast. I ran down the stairs and no one was in the living room. It scared me shitless. I turned off the TV and, afraid of my parents scolding me, I flew up the stairs and jumped in my bed. When my daughter was 3 or 4, she had an imaginary friend named Johnny. I had just put her to bed. I kept hearing her playing with her toys, so I scolded her a few times and she finally settled down. About 15 minutes later, she was getting rowdy again, so I yelled at her, and she said Johnny wants to play. And I told her to tell him no, and that it was bedtime. She did and settled down long enough for me to relax. That's when I heard toys flying across the room and my daughter screaming. I ran into her room and she said Johnny was mad and was throwing toys. I looked at where she was pointing, and her toy box was completely empty. She slept in my bed for the next few weeks. I was staying in a hotel in Denver, Colorado. The first 2 nights went without incident, but come the 3rd night, I began to notice this guy was watching me from all over the hotel. I saw him in the hallway, the lobby, even the hotel's bar area. I told the hotel staff, but they couldn't do anything because nobody in the hotel fit this guy's description. Turns out, the guy who had been following me around wasn't even staying at the hotel. I later found out he was a convicted sex offender and was once charged with rape. I'm glad he was arrested though. The police found him hiding in a closet of a neighboring room right across the hall from mine. This guy thought he was in my room. God knows what he would have done to me if he'd guessed the room numbers correctly. Let's just say I left the hotel and slept in my car instead. This happened when I was 12. I grew up in an affluent suburban neighborhood. My friends and I would usually explore and play. This one day in particular, we were walking in this forest by one of my friends' houses when we heard a twig snap. I turned around and saw a middle-aged man hiding by a tree just 3 feet behind us. I pointed him out to my friends, who began to get creeped out. The man spoke. He said that he wanted us to help him find his dog. We knew he was lying, so we just ran. Beside our hearts pounding, we could hear the man's footsteps. We got to my house and told my parents. They called the cops, and surprisingly, nothing came of it. I suffered from sleep paralysis for about 10 years now. This is one of my horrifying encounters. I was laying on my side on the couch when I felt the inability to move. I thought, this is just great. I started getting the feeling of utter dread. I began to hear footsteps bouncing off the aluminum tiles in my kitchen. I felt hands grab my throat. I began to choke. I then heard a voice. Not yet. You're not ready yet. I'll come back later. This voice sounded disappointed. I jolted off the couch before I suffocated due to my sleep apnea. I'm scared one day I'll die while dreaming of my end. I hope that voice doesn't return to finish me off. One day after school, I went down into our basement to add some detail. It's an unfinished basement, which made it creepy. I always hated going down there because it felt like somebody was watching me from behind my shoulder. I was down there putting the laundry from the washer into the dryer. Once I was done, I jogged halfway up the stairs when I felt a firm grip on my left leg. I fell and began to scream as I was seemingly dragged down the stairs. After going down maybe 2 or 3 stairs, the grip on my leg was released. I sprinted up the stairs, slammed and locked the basement door. I still refuse to go down there to this day. It was the dead of winter and the cool, crisp air cut straight through my jacket. I stepped outside around 2 in the morning for a quick smoke before the brutal start to my workday. I've worked these early hours for years, but the exhaustion never gets easier. I lit my cigarette and just stood there, letting the nicotine settle in. That's when I hear it, a slow, drawn-out creaking sound, like old metal fighting itself. As it approached, the source came into view, a middle-aged man hunched over a child's bike, his chain letting out the most grating, rusty squeal I've ever heard. As he slowly pedaled past, he turned his head and gave me a wide, wild smile that didn't reach his eyes before disappearing down the block. I threw my cigarette to the ground, stomped it out, and bolted back inside. Not 10 minutes later, I hear the impossible. The same distinctive loud squeak of the bike right outside my house. Then a chilling shout ripped through the quiet street. "Where'd you go? We could have had so much fun." Let's just say I called off work that day and stayed inside, too afraid to look out the window. I still hear that relentless rusting squeak every few days. Now I'm seriously considering moving. I live in a small isolated cabin near the woods in Vermont. I keep a tight routine, which includes locking the deadbolt every single night. It's an old cabin, so the lock is stiff and distinct. You have to crank the key to get the bolt fully extended. There's no way it could lock itself, and certainly no way it could unlock itself. On Tuesday morning, I woke up around 6:30 a.m. It was still dark outside. I got out of bed and immediately felt that icy, skin-prickling feeling that something was wrong. I walked into the living room, and that's when I saw it. The front door was wide open. Not ajar, not slightly unlatched. It was pushed all the way back against the inner wall, letting in a ribbon of cold, damp air, and the sound of wind rustling the dead leaves outside. My heart hammered. I stood there for a full minute, frozen, trying to process it. I knew I had locked it. I remember the effort of turning the key before I went to bed. I crept over and slammed it shut, turning the key 3 times to be sure. Then I went back through the house, checking every window, checking the basement. Everything was locked and undisturbed. Nothing was missing. That was the worst part. Nothing was missing. A thief would have taken my laptop or my TV, but the only thing that had happened was the door being open. I went back to the front door, peered out the small window, and scanned the muddy ground near the porch. It was a set of boot prints. They started to my porch, and then ended. Walked up the steps, and directly went to the door. But here's the thing that makes me lose sleep. There were no exit prints. The only tracks were in the mud, and the ones leading in. I called the police, but they couldn't do anything. No forced entry, no crime. They suggested maybe I'd forgotten to lock it, and the wind blew it open. But the deadbolt was engaged when I slammed it shut, and the door opens inward against the wind. Someone walked into my house in the middle of the night, silently unlocked the heavy deadbolt, pushed the door wide open, and then simply vanished. To this day, I have no idea if they came in, if they stood there looking, or if they wanted to leave a terrifying message. I put in a security system, but every time I hear wind blow, I still check the deadbolt 3 times.